Okay, now let's talk about some crises that might arise in countries that are following fixed exchange. Oh my God. They're following fixed exchange rate regimes. Okay. So government wants to hold this as constant. Okay, that's the plan. For whatever reason, we will discuss that later, but government has decided that this is going to be the rate at which they exchange the domestic currency. Now, what might happen is just because of expectation, the government may be forced to abandon this just because of expectation. So suppose the expectation is that there will be a devaluation. Okay. So suppose the government of Bangladesh has pegged our currency to this. $1 is equal to 80 taka. And the government wants to hold this as fixed. However, there is expectation, there are rumors, or whatever it may be, that the government plans to devalue the Bangladeshi currency and turn it into this. Okay. Let's assume that the government has no plans of doing this. They may have plans to do it. That doesn't matter. Even if the government does not have any plans to do this, as long as investors and people expect this to happen, it's going to have an effect on the on the government. So let's see how that will be. Remember this equation. Foreign interest rate minus E plus 1 E minus ET divided by ET. Right? Now here's the thing. When we have a fixed exchange rate regime, ET is equal to ET plus 1, right? We don't expect exchange rate to change. So effectively what happens is that this entire thing, this is equal to 0. And we end up in a situation, we've seen this in chapter 19 already, is that domestic interest rate must be equal to the foreign interest rate. That's how the interest rate parity is maintained, right? Now suppose that there is this rumor that there is going to be a devaluation. Okay. So of course, if there is a rumor, there is no certainty. So suppose economic agents believe that there is let's say 25% chance that taka will be devalued by let's say 20%. That also means that investors believe that there is a 75% chance that there will be no devaluation. These are all, they both mean the same thing. Okay. Now, how will the investors react to this situation? What we see is that this is no longer equal to 0. I mean, this and this are no longer the same. Expectation might change. The question is, by how much is expectation changing? So here's what's going to happen. There is a 25% chance that taka will be devalued by 20%. But there is also a 75% chance that the value of taka will not change. If we do the calculation, what we see is over here, how much do we get? 5% minus 0.05. So let's take this equation down again. I equals to I star minus E expectation t plus 1 minus ET divided by ET. When we saw this last time, this was equal to 0, but it is no longer 0 right now, right? What we have now is interest equals to foreign interest minus 0.05, which gives us plus 0.05. What does this mean? It means that because investors expect a devaluation. So once again, as I said, the government may have actual plans to devalue the currency, or they may not. This may be purely a rumor. But because investors expect a devaluation, they will demand a higher interest rate. See, that's the problem. So for example, if the foreign interest rate is, let's say, 7%, what does the domestic interest rate can be? It can be 7% plus 5%. So it has to be 12%. Because investors are fearful of a devaluation, they will need to be compensated by a higher interest rate. Now that's a problem, right? Because of course, especially if the government has no plans for devaluation, economically, it'll be pretty difficult to offer an extra 5% interest rate. And what's going to happen as a result of this I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. I don't know if you guys are seeing it or if it's just from my end. But anyways, what was I saying? Yeah, so because of this rumor, this misperception that investors have, that there is going to be a devaluation, they now demand a higher interest rate. Of course, that the country may not be able to provide this higher interest rate. So what will investors do? First thing, investors sell domestic bonds. Of course, by domestic, in this example, let's say Bangladeshi bonds. Both investors from Bangladesh and from other countries will sell Bangladeshi bonds, and they will collect taka, right? When you sell Bangladeshi bonds, you earn taka. Then investors will take this taka and they will try to invest it in another country, right? So investors, to invest in another country, what do they need? Suppose they want to invest in India. What will they need to do? They will need to take taka, sell this taka, and buy rupee with it, and then invest in rupee. So investors try to sell taka, a lot of taka, a lot of, the supply of taka is suddenly going to go up. As a result, what will happen? The value of taka will face a downward pressure. effectively what happens when supply suddenly goes up is that there is a downward pressure on the price. In this case, so look, here are the problems. First of all, this means there is going to be capital flight. Money is going to leave the country. No one wants that. Just taka, dollar, whatever it may be, just currency leaving the country. That's a bad thing. Second of all, remember that we are in a fixed exchange rate regime, right? The government does not want to devalue. They want to maintain, where did I write it down? So yeah, in a fixed exchange regime, the government wants to maintain this E. As a result, when there is a large number of investors with a huge sum of taka, and they're trying to sell taka, if the government wants to maintain E, what will the government have to do? Buy all the taka and pay the fixed exchange rate. That's the thing. Even though there is a downward pressure, the government has to ignore that. And since the government wants to maintain the fixed exchange rate peg, they will have to buy up all the currency, all the taka that the people, the investors are trying to sell at the fixed level. If not, then the fixed exchange rate regime just collapses. So the government has to do this. And as they're doing this, what that means is that the countries' foreign exchange reserve is depleted. You see, that's one of the major problems with fixed exchange rate, is that as long as there's even a rumor that there may be a devaluation coming, investors will start to panic. They will try to pull their money out of the country, unless, of course, unless a higher interest rate can be offered. So if the government can offer a higher 12% interest rate, that's fine, but it's very unlikely that it will be possible. As a result, investors try to pull their money out of the country. First of all, that leads to capital flight, which is a bad thing. And second of all, if the government wants to maintain the exchange rate, they have to keep buying all the taka at the rate that they have fixed, which means that the country's exchange rate reserve is going to be depleted. So this is a major problem with countries that are trying to follow fixed exchange rate regimes.